Alfyn, the bona fide apothecary of Clearbrook. Alfyn is one that thinks of others before himself, and sometimes to a great extent. He won't charge you for any of the work he does, but gets recuperated by knowing the one he helped is doing better. But despite his outwards personality, he is by no means a pushover. He's not one for revenge necessarily, but he'll always set out to do what's right no matter how tough the task. Alfyn can and will be able to take on any task headstrong, and this not only shows it through his character, but also his stats. Alfyn's notable stats come in the form of his decent physical attack, high physical defense, and good elemental defense, and in exchange has no speed and accuracy. So while he can function as a relatively good tank, he sure won't be hitting like one. The lack of an accuracy stat means he can miss a lot of physical attacks a good amount of the time, which is a bit of a problem when his elemental attack isn't necessarily the greatest. Similarly with his speed stat, because it is that low, more often than not he'll be going last in the party. This can be somewhat of a detriment for supportive secondary jobs as they function best when going first in the party. However, despite his speed stat being low, he can still make for a good support unit thanks to his relatively good elemental defense and other quirks thanks to his base job. Alfyn's base job is the Apothecary. The Apothecary job comes with a mixture of offensive and supportive capabilities, which on its own is rather amazing. Because the job isn't heavily focused on one specific playstyle, Alfyn can realistically choose any job that he wants, as long as it complements his stats. Generally speaking, if you wanted to go into a job that was more offensive, you'd sooner take something that complements his physical attack over his elemental since his physical attack is much higher. Likewise, if you wanted to dedicate Alfyn into support role, you would want to take up jobs that allow him to make the most use of those skills. For example, you wouldn't want to make Alfyn your dancer because he's one of the slowest travelers in the game. This means dancer buffs can potentially last less time depending on when he acts in the party. Then you have the actual apothecary skills himself. For offensive purposes, you have Icicle, Amputation, and Poison in Last Stand. Icicle is an ice spell that targets a single foe, and while Alfyn's magical attack isn't necessarily the greatest, it's nice to have around for breaking purposes. Next we have Amputation, which is yet another single foe hitting move that deals physical damage with an axe. This is more complementary to Alfyn since he has a physical attack stat to work with. Then there's Empoison, which attempts to poison a foe. I wouldn't say this is the most useful move since it not only is unreliable, but more often than not you'd want to be doing regular damage as that will end up doing more in the long run during the important segments of the game. And finally, there's Last Stand. Last Stand is an axe hitting move that deals damage to every foe based on how much HP the traveler has left. The lower the HP is, the more damage it will do to foes, which means it pairs extremely well with skills that increase physical attack when below a certain HP threshold. And of course, how can we forget to talk about Alfyn's talents? The two talents that Alfyn has are Inquire and Concoct. Inquire allows the traveler to gain information from NPCs as long as they meet a level requirement. The information in question can range between details about an individual NPC, to getting discounts at the local inn, to even unlocking more items in the shop. The path action is similar to Cyrus's, only instead of having to be a certain level, you have to make a percent-based check for succession, which can be good or bad depending on the circumstances. It's simple yet effective in many cases. And then we have Concoct. Concoct, for a lack of better words, is stupid freaking good. Concoct is by far one of the strongest talents in the entire game. Concoct is effectively a move that allows Alfyn to mix two ingredients and inflict effects on both allies and foes. This can range anywhere between healing SP and HP, granting boosts, reviving, removing status ailments, buffing allies, and dealing damage to foes. To cover everything on the list would be too extensive and unnecessary, so I'll be discussing the most important points and why Concoct is amazing as it is. First off, we can start with the talent itself. In order to use Concoct, you must have the proper ingredients and components to make such combinations. They can be obtained through a variety of means, such as buying them through shops, stealing and or purchasing them through NPCs, or getting them from enemy drops. You'll find that some ingredients can only come from enemy drops, such as with the Essence of Plum. They shouldn't be too hard to obtain those throughout the course of the game, but it doesn't hurt to buy them nevertheless. Also, it should be worth mentioning that you can't boost with Concoct. I guess it's for balance purposes? But who could say for sure? Then there are the Seeds and Dusts. Seeds and Dust are simple yet effective means of understanding the Concoct talent. There are 4 types of Seeds and Dust: Soothing, Purifying, Injurious, and Ruinous. Soothing and Purifying are Seeds and Dust respectively that have ally buffing effects. For example, using a Nocturne in a Soothing Seed will heal one party member for a certain amount of HP and cure poison. Likewise, if you use Dust instead, the effect will apply to every party member. Between Soothing and Purifying, one will have much more potency than the other. However, regardless of which you use, by targeting every ally, the potency becomes much weaker. That being said, it can be worth it in many cases, as buffing an entire party is generally what makes a talent as disgusting as it is. On a similar note, you have the Injurious and Ruinous Seed in Dust. which can work in the same way as the other seeds in Dusk. However, these target the foes instead, and depending on the component used, you can end up using different types of elements and effects. For example, using a Sleepweed with a Ruinous Seed will deal ice damage to a single foe 3 times and potentially apply the sleep effect. Likewise, changing the seed to Dust will apply to every foe instead. There are so many combinations in the game that you essentially want to find them all out for yourself. But don't worry about forgetting which combination does what, as the game will log the combination for you after using it once. It's a simple mechanic to understand once you start using it, so don't feel too intimidated by it. Likewise, I think it goes without saying that Concoct is going to be Alfyn's greatest contribution to any team. And because Alfyn's main gimmick is going to revolve around the Concoct ability, you can realistically choose any secondary job, as Concoct will be the main focus for Alfyn. Of course, if you wish to further bolster one role, you can still take up some secondary job recommendations, such as with the Cleric job. The Cleric job is not a bad option for Alfyn to go into, as the secondary job has plenty of supportive capabilities for him to go and make use of, 2 of which include healing. You see, because Alfyn has a good elemental defense stat, Alfyn can become an effective Cleric. There's also the matter of light magic Alfyn gains from the Cleric job. The only thing worth mentioning is that the light magic that the job comes with will more than likely end up being used for breaking only, if at all, for 3 reasons. The first reason is that despite getting a % modifier into elemental attack, he still ends up having more physical attack than elemental attack. Secondly, if you plan on running him as a support unit anyway, then it wouldn't matter since you will be spamming support moves first and foremost. It's still additional weaponry at his disposal at the end of the day, so if you do end up attacking with him, you can easily give him double axe and some extra equipment that can complement that playstyle. And finally, there's Concoct. Concoct is able to output light-based magic with specific components, so almost all magic spells that Alfyn has becomes rather redundant when you can simply use Concoct. Even so, the Cleric job is not a bad option for Alfyn whatsoever, so if you do need a Cleric for the team, he's definitely an option. Next is the Merchant job. The Merchant job is also mixed in its nature, as it comes with a decent amount of offensive and supportive skills for Alfyn to make use of. Offensively, the Merchant comes with 2 wind spells, Hired Help and Bifflegan's Bounty. Hired Help is an interesting skill since it can act as a means of supporting your allies through buffs. Bifflegan's Bounty, meanwhile, is a simple divine skill that does damage to a foe and gives you money for it. And despite Alfyn's middling elemental attack stat, he can still make use of the wind spells for breaking. Moreover, the additional weapon types that the Merchant grants means he'll be a relatively good breakbot with the 3 weapons and 2 types of spells he has. Then there are the supportive skills. Supportively, the Merchant comes with Rest, Donate BP, and Sidestep. Rest allows the equipped traveler to recover HP, SP, and cure status ailments with 1 action, which can be especially helpful if you plan on using Alfyn as a support unit, as that will eat up a lot of SP. Sidestep allows the traveler to dodge a physical attack 100% guaranteed. This can also be relatively nice if you want to extend Alfyn's longevity during battles. And finally, the best skill of all from the Merchant job, Donate BP. Donate BP allows the traveler to donate BP. This combined with the potency of Concoct means you can reliably get boosts on any traveler you want on almost every turn. So Merchant Alfyn is a decent combination if you're looking to make him into a good support unit and breakbot. Of course, if support doesn't tickle your fancy, you can always run the Warrior job. The Warrior job is basically an all-offensive job that has no means of supportive capabilities. The job also comes with swords and polearms, meaning there isn't any overlap when it comes to equipping it as a secondary job for Alfyn. Likewise, the job also raises HP for the traveler, so it can make moves such as Last Stand even more powerful. However, there is an issue with Warrior Alfyn that can be a big detriment to the performance of the party: Alfyn's accuracy stat. Because Alfyn has a low accuracy stat, there's a good possibility that he'll be missing a lot of physical attacks. This can be alleviated with equipment that increases accuracy, but only by so much. So be on the lookout when using Warrior Alfyn. It has a high ceiling for damage, but it can easily be missed by a simple accuracy check. Likewise, there's the War Master. The War Master job isn't necessarily a bad pick for Alfyn if you wish to turn him into a physical damage dealer. There are some things that should be noted before you decide to dedicate that role to him. First off, if you do turn Alfyn into a War Master, you'll have access to every single element in the game. How? That's because of Concoct. Concoct allows Alfyn to deal elemental damage for each element, and since the War Master comes with every weapon, Alfyn is able to become the ultimate breakbot with a total coverage of 16 weapons. That being said, making him into a War Master means he'll have to cut down on his supportive role, as Alfyn will want to focus on one role. Having a mixture of supportive and offensive capabilities means Alfyn will have too many roles to work with, so it's best to focus on one thing if possible. Beyond that, the only other thing you have to worry about is Alfyn's accuracy stat, as it's extremely low. Normally this stat wouldn't be a problem for travelers such as Cyrus and Ophelia, since they heavily focus on magic that doesn't require any sort of accuracy check. However, as a physical damage dealer, having a lack of accuracy can lead to many of your moves missing. This can be a massive blow to someone like Alfyn if he's attempting to run War Master. Thankfully, Concoct abilities can't miss. but that won't alleviate the issue, so it might be worth thinking about other secondary jobs if this turns you off from the War Master. Beyond secondary jobs, there's still support skills that need to be taken into consideration. However, because of how Alfyn is built, there's only so many complementary support skills for him to make use of. Of course, there is always going to be the bread and butter skill, Saving Grace, which allows you to heal above maximum HP. But besides that, the support skills that Alfyn can take the most advantage of for his dedicated roles will either focus entirely on offense or support with Concoct. For offense, Alfyn can use Summon Strength, Surpassing Power, Stronger Strikes, Fortitude, and Physical Prowess. Summon Strength increases the physical attack stat by a flat 50 points. It's rather nice to have around for early game. Meanwhile, later into the game, you can run Surpassing Power, which increases the damage cap. For more damage output, you can run Stronger Strength, which increases damage if striking a weakness, Fortitude, which increases damage based on the amount of HP the traveler is missing, and Physical Prowess, which increases physical attack and defense indefinitely during battles. These are all really nice skills for Alfyn to use if you plan on using them offensively. Meanwhile, for supportive purposes, Alfyn can use Resist Ailment, Heightened Healing, Patience, and Divine Aura. Resist Ailments and Divine Aura aren't necessarily support skills, but are here as a means of helping Alfyn bolster his survivability, which in turn can lead to more support. Resist Ailments is just as it sounds. It gives Alfyn the ability to nullify any form of status ailment. Of course, if he does end up getting inflicted with one, he could always use Rehabilitate to cure it. Meanwhile, Divine Aura grants the traveler a 25% chance at nullifying any damage. This can be really nice when you want him to focus on being a support unit, as you won't have to take extra actions to heal up your support unit. Then there's Heightened Healing and Patience. Heightened Healing simply increases the potency of moves that heal and recover HP and SP. It's a nice skill to have for someone like Alfyn if you plan on making him fully supportive. Likewise, you can run Patience, which also grants a 25% chance at allowing the traveler to act again on the same turn. That turn can realistically be used for anything, so it isn't necessarily supportive only. Even so, it can be used to further support your allies. These are all the support skills that Alfyn can take advantage of to the fullest, and it is recommended that you at least take a gander at them if you plan on taking either of these roles. And with that about covers Alfyn. Alfyn can be flexible, all things considered, but because of his Concoct ability, you probably want to focus more on the supportive side than offensive. Still, there's nothing wrong with going within either direction. If you ended up using other jobs not mentioned in the video, feel free to let me know which jobs you chose and how they worked out for you. I'm always interested in what you have to say. I hope this guide provided insight into Alfyn as well as any help along the way. Until then, do the typical YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you later.